Thanks very much, Christian. And without further ado, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our guest speaker today. I'm quite amazed that she actually found the time to speak to us because I know she's busy filming and gearing up for the next season of The Crown, which is set for release in November. She's a formidable force in film, television, and theatre, having played many iconic roles, now writing and directing herself, as well as her avid support for numerous charities and humanitarian causes. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Gillian Anderson to today's event. Gillian, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure.
As you know, Yext, we're a company that's about helping brands get their information out to consumers and to some extent managing the truth that they want to share. And of course, we couldn't, before we start, help but have a bit of fun with the X-Files. The truth is out there. Yes. Okay. So we were really delighted to join us.
Yeah.
And what I'd love to do is just talk a little bit more about some of the wider characters you played in the career that you've had. And it seems to me that whether it's Dana Scully in X-Files, or whether it's Stella Gibson in The Fall, or even characters in Sex Education, you are choosing characters that in some way are trying to seek out the truth or dispel misinformation. Is that something true? Is that something that
Is that true?
Is that true? Yeah, exactly.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I would say that in my personal life, I do have a tendency to steer towards truth, and I try to address things head on, which is either embraced or not by people in my life. But I don't think it's been a conscious decision with the characters that I play. And I also think that, in equal measure, I have sought out characters that are the complete opposite to what Scully. I spent 10 years doing with Scully.
Yes.
And some of them are, equally committed to their lies or their denial, whether it's Miss Havisham or Media and American Gods, or even Blanche Dubois in Streetcar, or Mark Channing. They're all somehow slightly committed to living in a world of denial. And there's something as an actor that's as exciting about playing a character who's making that choice as opposed to, steering towards.
Yes. So they stand
realism.
For something, right?
Yeah.
They're strong characters who stand for something.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Whether it's lies or justice, that they have strong opinions about things.
Yes, and you played, countless roles. In fact, I saw you do Blanche Dubois in theatre in London.
Oh,
yes.
Thanks for going.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I always enjoy the theatre experience as much as I do the TV and cinema experience. Of course, people know you for the big roles that I mentioned, initially, but you've done a whole host of things. So, how do you must have so much choice now. Is that true? And, you have your pick of roles that you probably get approached about. How do you choose now what roles you want to do going forward? What sort of draws you to things that are interesting now for you to do?
First and foremost, I feel like it has to be something that is challenging. I think after you've done a character like Blanche or even Stella, very, multi-layered characters, it's hard to take on anything that is thin in some way, or and so that is definitely a contender. But also not repeating myself. I think after especially doing Scully for so long, right out of the gate, wanting to do something completely different.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the choices that I've made after that are following along those same lines of just continuously not just wanting to challenge myself, but really wanting to make sure that I'm not repeating myself after having repeated a character for so long. I think probably those are the biggest motivators.
Yes.
But also stuff comes, stuff comes, and a lot of it has to do as a working mother about schedule. I'm a big one for making sure that there's time on the ground.
Sure.
for the kids, and so that does dictate the choices that I
So does that
make.
tend to mean you move more towards cinema or TV, where you have like a filming schedule rather than theatre, which can be a bit open-ended? Or
not necessarily. I think if I jump into doing theatre, I will say I can only do this if we end here.
Yes.
Or I can only take this TV role if I can work here, and here.
Sure.
You know, which is the blessing of, you know, having worked for a long time. But yeah, I mean, I do often say when somebody brings something to my attention that might be a series, if the script is good, ask if there's any chance that we can shoot it in the UK. If it's something that they want me to be a part of the developing of it.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's been projects that I really like to script, but it would mean a commitment to flying to the States and being there for long periods of time. And I choose not to do that today.
And out of the roles you've played, is there like one that you personally connect with, that you feel that is the one that's had the most impact on me, and also that you've learned something from, if you can?
Well, I mean, there's been a couple. Well, there's been a few. I mean, I've been really, really lucky, and probably that I have the most emotional connection to, because it had the biggest impact on me as an actor, but also on my psyche, and also just in terms of the challenge of it, which was Blanche. You know, it's it's probably the most challenging role I've ever had, and you know, the enjoyment of doing someone like Blanche is, you know, you can basically do anything. I mean, I'm not a particularly extroverted person. I mean, she is all extrovert. And so that's so much fun as an actor to be able to jump into something that is just so completely different than yourself.
Stretches you. And,
but also to have fun in it, and the, you know, the joy of doing that. But it's very tragic. I mean, and dipping into that for too long has its own challenge.
And do you feel you're able to do that when you're performing? You're able to step out of the character, or do you live with it whilst you're performing the character?
I mean, when I was doing it here, the Young Vic, where you would have seen it, I was still doing, you know, school runs and et cetera, which was its own challenge. When we took it to New York, I really did narrow my life down. It felt weird to go to the shops. If you've been Blanche Dubois for, you know, all night long, you're not going to go to the bodega, you know, at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you know. So and I did need to find, particularly in New York, there was a certain point where I started to get a bit lost in it, and needed to find ways to ground myself. You know, to pull back a little bit, to not be too deep in it, so that I, you know, was in danger. But I needed to ground myself in certain scenes where it wasn't so necessary for me to be 100% present in her. And so, you know, that I'd never had that experience before. And at first, it almost felt like a spiritual experience. It almost felt like I was so there. You know, and one of the other actors that I was working with kept coming to me and saying, "Do you know what happens?" And I'm like, "Where did you go? You know, it was amazing." And I'd be like, "I know." And it was like, I can't.
It was almost transcendental.
It was almost like, it got a little bit scary. But so somebody I worked with taught me kind of how to, you know, root myself a bit during the production, which definitely saved my sanity.
Bring yourself back to a bit of real life, and stepping away from the character for a moment. I can understand that. And you mentioned it already, but a lot of I think the expectation now from viewers on TV is to build an emotional connection with the things they're viewing. And I think more and more that's over a longer period of time, right? I think when you look at TV, people expect like 2, 3, 4, 5 series almost of content. So, and a key part of that, I think, was trusting the characters and having that emotional connection through trust. How do you How do you go about that? I mean, you talked about kind of coming out of the
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
one is that in the olden days, the way that we did it, for X-Files, for instance, we did 24 episodes per year.
Yeah.
Now that is just unfathomable today.
Yeah, sure.
And I remember when I first started to do the fall over here.
That must have been pretty intense.
It was intense, but because it was only 6 episodes, it was like, we actually spent longer per episode and had more time and space and everything.
Yeah.
You really, we had to kind of convince the Americans that it was a substantial series, even though it was just 6 episodes. They would look at it and think, oh no, that's like a movie of the week, or that's, that's nothing.
Yes.
We're not gonna, it's not a series,
Yes.
And then, slowly but surely the networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, they would start to, and HBO over there, they'd start to do shorter blocks of TV shows. But what ends up happening with that, even though, with something like Game of Thrones, where you just want it to go on and on and on, they want as many episodes as they can get. What ends up happening is you have to prove very, very quickly that you are worthy of paying attention to. So very often, even though a Netflix show, for instance, may only be 6 or 10 episodes, they can judge whether people are watching a whole episode all the way through or not. Their algorithms or whatever can pick up on that. And if people aren't watching it through, or they're quitting halfway through, even if it's a hit, even if it's trending, gone.
Yes.
And so you really have to kind of hit that stream and that, part of the zeitgeist or whatever, very much quicker than I think one did. I mean, in the old days, you had pilot episodes, right? So if everybody watched the pilot, and then they might commission a few more, and then maybe a few more, and etc. And it feels somehow, even though it felt at the time like a ruthless formula, it feels much more ruthless today, in a sense.
Yes.
I think, because for all intents and purposes, you can feel like you actually do have a hit.
So it's almost like a real-time box office, which has always been this sort of dilemma between commercial success and critical success, I guess, is, with now the algorithms. And,
I think that's fair enough.
But I guess as viewers, we don't see that side of kind of the commercial reality of TV or movie making, which is, of course, now if it's doing well, we'll continue to make it in TV. If not, we'll just cut it and do something else. Yeah. But it feels to me like a lot more characters are now played out over a longer period of time. It's interesting. I mean, you might say, well, there's a lot of 6-episode things happening. Yeah. So you've got to sort of sustain the character over time and keep that trust and that connection, right?
Yeah, I mean, my first experience of that was in doing it on the X-Files, where that was a proper long period of time. The original 9 years, and that's its own challenge in and of itself. Is not just
with you every year.
It's not just to keep it interesting, for the audience, but really keep it interesting for yourself. Like, how many more times can I not see the alien right in front of my eyes? How many more times can I be skeptical about ... But you find your way through, and it's similar with theatre in a way, where if you've got a run, whether it's 2 months or 6 months, you need to find your way into making the same lines over and over again feel fresh. And as an actor, once you get comfortable with it, you start to do things that challenge yourself, or that you put a prop just a little bit further on the stage, just those are like ridiculous things that you do just to keep yourself on your toes.
Which do you prefer? Do you prefer like the theatre, the regular performance of the same material, or portraying a character over many episodes?
It's interesting. I've had a lot of I've had good experiences with theatre the last couple of times that I've done it, Blanche, and then or Streetcar, and then All About Eve, and those productions were such a joy to be a part of, and such great companies, that a lot of the fear that I normally feel when doing theatre, or a lot of the things that have come up for me in the past, where I've been in the middle of rehearsal and started to really freak out and think, why did I do this to myself? Who am I kidding that I can do this? What am I thinking? You know, that I hope I don't jinx myself by saying that. I am so superstitious. Anyway, so they were such that theatre has actually become more of a joy. And even though I would say yes to it in the past, and just deal with the fear, it was still something that was like this looming terror that I needed to work through. And
how did you get yourself through that?
Well, good question. I mean, you just somehow you just do, and if you, I'm sure it's with anything. If you know, I've got a friend who, she's an economist, and she does, you know, I hate doing speeches behind a podium, and she lives for it. She could talk for an hour and a half about her topic with a few notes down there or whatever. I am not that person at all. And the thought of doing that brings absolute terror to my system. And yet she could do it all day long. And I'm sure there are things that she finds incredibly challenging that she would wish she never had to do again. And you just, you know, my experience of showing up and being afraid is that if you trust yourself, if you trust that you've put everything into the process, if that's a rehearsal process or whatever it is, if you trust that you've done your homework and the research and everything, it is there. It will be there. And it will. So very often, in the past, even if I've had a panic attack on stage, which I have had, trusting that my body knows what to do, I can be literally freaking out in my head, but the words will be coming out of my mouth. And it's that, it's seeing that I can trust myself. And that trust the process. That, you know, can allow you to potentially let go and go, no matter what, I have shown myself that it'll be okay, even if I feel like I'm going to internally combust.
That must be quite a detached, so it sounds like a very intellectual, detached thing, right? Trust the process and you know, go through the motion, and you know, and it's confidence.
I mean, it feels very visceral at the time. It doesn't feel at all like it's necessarily a technique. It's more, I mean, what other choice do you have? What other choice do you have? You can walk off the stage and you do play those things out. If this gets any worse, I'm just going to exit stage left.
And not come back. Which brings me on to something else, because as well as your acting, and we'll come on to some of your activism in a moment, but you've also a few years ago wrote a book with Jennifer Nadel, W-E, for for Women Everywhere, which was really interesting. I've dipped into it and had a look at it, and it's also something I think which is applicable to anyone, because it's a lot about what we just talked about empowerment and confidence specifically for women. What sort of provoked you to write that? What inspired you to write it? Why did you decide to write that? Was it some of these things about having confidence? And
I think it was, you know, it was initially realizing that essentially, whether we're female or male or however we identify, we're all in the same boat as human beings in terms of our life experiences. And you know, and I think it's more relevant now than ever because of COVID and everything. But the degree of anxiety, the degree of fear, the degree of depression, the increase in self-harming, particularly amongst young girls, the impact that social media has had on all of us, but particularly youth, and you know, and the amount of bullying and etc. that's online, and because we as women, because that's all we can speak to, being women, Jennifer and I, is because we are united by the fact that we are women and we all have the same similar experiences. Is there not a way that we can create a community, that we can reach out to each other and be a support to each other in times of anxiety or whatever, and create support systems for ourselves? But can we agree together we're struggling, that it's hard, that we have such huge expectations on ourselves to be able to be super women, or to be able to have it all in a career and a home life and children, and be able to get food on the table by a certain time, whatever it is that we, that we do, and that nevertheless it is a challenge, and that we can maybe not put such high pressures on ourselves, or find ways. And so that this book is a handbook, or a tool in a sense, to show women or men that there is another way of doing things, whether it's about getting honest about what's going on in your life, or getting honest about the amount of time you spend on screens, getting honest about just, what is hard and challenging and difficult, or maybe stuff in the past that you're still hanging on to that's keeping you back. Finding different ways to approach your life, finding space within your life to be able to give yourself time for yourself, so that you can experience being the best version of yourself. You can essentially live your potential, so that you can be there for other people, so that you can be of service, so that you can awaken the activist inside you, and be of service to your community, or society, a greater society as a whole, or whatever it is.
And in the book, I mean, it's really impressive, because you expose a lot of truths about yourself. So, that must have been quite scary, right, to sort of lay that out in the book.
Well, it was interesting, because at the beginning, the publishers were, liked the fact that if we were both writing our own experiences, that we didn't necessarily put our names at the end of our experiences, because it's everyone's experience. And so what does it matter whose experience it was, whether it was Jennifer or mine? But at the end of the day, actually, there's something incredibly vulnerable about admitting the whole truth, which is the whole truth, which is that's me. And being able to read that someone else has had a similar experience to you, or has felt this, or has done this. And certainly there are areas kept, to not be every headline out there, but but other areas of the book where I was very, very honest about specifics and challenges, and yet that is, on the one hand, it's incredibly freeing, and on the other hand, it's quite a big step to take, of somebody who's as private as I am, to suddenly start talking about specifics of things. After the book came out, I would, if there was something that I was reading a newspaper, and then those feeds come up on the side or whatever. And for a long time, it was Gillian Anderson, the depressive, or Gillian Anderson, yes, mental health issues. That suddenly became the thing. Whereas, last week it was something else.
And I think what the thread through it all, and I think you mentioned already, that comes out is just this whole principle of honesty. I know you talk about a number of principles, but it's being honest with yourself, and honest with, and also by sharing that everyone goes through these things. So we just kind of can say it's fine, but everyone has these demons, or whatever it may be, or experiences. And the key
honesty is a very, very big, it's one of the first principles that comes up, I think, in the book, because until we get honest with ourselves about, really honest, and it's really hard. It's really hard to get really honest about one's relationship, one's marriage, one's relationship to food, one's relationship to parents, whatever it is. It's challenging. And yet sometimes we can't really move forward in our life until we do.
You get to that truth.
Until you get to that,
And I think the other principle that I love is just the principle of kindness, because it's sometimes seen as quite a glib thing, kindness, or something that is important. I think it's really important, especially at the moment with everything that's going on. It's just kindness, just an amazing quality for people to have.
Yeah, I heard a friend of mine told me recently, who lives in the Goulburn Road area, who's lived there for 20 years and has, seen the shopkeepers around, and, it has a big Middle Eastern community and Northern African community. And all of a sudden, he knows everybody by name.
Yeah.
He knows the kids' names. He knows, it's really strengthened the communities.
Yes.
And that's just, if that's what comes at the end of this, is just that we are seeing the other human beings who are in our midst and paying attention and taking a little bit extra time, then
totally. I mean, I've certainly sort of built the smaller shop owners and so on around by me, and I think I heard someone also say tough times like that don't bring out the best in people, they bring out the truth in people, which is another I think, interesting thing. It's true. There's so much good nature in people, that really comes out in this. So both Scully and Stella are now seen as almost like feminist icons. Did you choose those characters because they had that potential, or was it something that you grew them into when you developed the character over time?
But when I first started doing Scully, I didn't know what was what. I mean, I was 24 years old, and also for a long time, I think while I was playing her in that decade, the word feminist didn't come up. I mean, it was a lot of young women saying, "You changed my life," or "Because of you, I ... or because of Scully, but when I started to do Stella and started doing press for Stella, again, I hadn't necessarily qualified her in that way. It was the press that started to.
Right.
And then I started to think of her differently.
Okay.
And I think at first I shied away from it in the conversations and doing publicity, until I realized it's almost like somehow she inadvertently got me in touch with the feminist aspect of myself that had been there all along, even back during the Scully days.
Yes.
But I'd either not quite understood it enough, or didn't want to admit it, or I think for a period I felt like it was, there was many periods where it was taboo. And so it was, Stella really that helped me and allowed me to embrace not only those very obvious aspects of her, but also aspects of myself that I hadn't really thought about in that way. It's just it's intrinsically part of my nature.
Yes.
And yet I wouldn't have qualified it as such.
Yes. Okay. So I guess there were two roles at different stages of your career, as you said. With the latter role, Stella, in the fall, you were able to develop that a little bit and think about it more and have the opportunity to, I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think for many of us, you're also well known for your activism and your charity work. So I guess related to that, now you think of, I guess you made a career a bit more, and the roles that you want to do and the roles that you should be doing. Do you see then a responsibility as like a public figure, the opportunity to, I guess, be a platform to share the things that you care and are passionate about, or give a voice for, issues that don't have a voice? Is that something now you actively think about and work on?
Yeah, I mean, I think very early on when that became an expected aspect of my public self, I wasn't quite ready yet, and I think I did it slightly begrudgingly.
Okay.
And then I think as I got older and I realized that there were certain topics that really moved me, that really got me. that I wanted to have something to say about them. I wanted to do something about them. I wanted, whether it was being the face of it or supporting it financially or raising awareness about it or whatever way. I think it was then that I started to take ownership more of the fact that, I mean, of course, that's what, I don't want to stand up and get political necessarily. I don't want to necessarily stand up as a spokesperson about something, but if it has to do with whether it's whatever it is, human rights or animal rights or civil rights, I do I do have a lot to say, and I find that I am constantly at battle in myself as to, because I'm not a natural public speaker. I don't enjoy it. If I do it, I do it kicking and screaming, and when I'm in it, I may feel, phew, that went all right. Actually, I can do that now and again, but most of the time, it's. I wouldn't say it's naturally for me, even though it is a part of, even though but I do. There are certain things I think that I've at various times felt so moved by that I almost can't not. When somebody asks if I will, I don't want to be that person who says no. I don't want to be. It makes such a difference to the movement, or it makes such a difference to these women or to this group to have somebody as an advocate, who's raising a voice where there's not listened to or silenced in some way. That I do. When invigorated by that fact, I get it does wake up something in me.
So you're often amplifying a voice that isn't heard. What about dispelling misinformation about certain subjects or topics? Is that sort of part of it as well, or is there any element to the work you do?
No, not really. I mean, there's one charity that I've followed for many years that has an equal amount of people online who are against it as for it. And there's been a couple times, I think, where I've spoken out about the huge amount of good in multi-nation government policy that they've done, as opposed to the small work that people criticize. I think that's the extent of correcting. And I don't. My presence on social media is not that either. I mean, I don't comment on political things. I don't comment on other people's statements.
You don't get in a debate. You're just trying to amplify a sort of disadvantaged or
if it's a charity or
We'll get onto Instagram in a moment.
Okay.
That comes up at the end. So I just now want to sort of change tack and think about the future, what's coming up, specifically your acting roles. So we all know that you're in The Crown coming up. Yeah. And I think you've said that you're relishing getting below the surface of Margaret Thatcher, who you'll be playing.
Yeah.
So I guess you've played a number of historical or real-life figures.
Yeah.
How do you go about that versus creating a character like Stella or Dana or Jean Milburn? How do you begin that process of getting under the skin of say, Margaret Thatcher?
Well, in something that is not historical, so you have to rely so much about in what's on the page. Yeah. You go back to the text and back to the text and back to the text, and then you build your own world around that and history, etc. With something like an historical character like a Margaret Thatcher, there's so much information out there. There's so much research to be done. You start at the beginning. Yeah. I mean, that's been my experience is you start at the beginning and read and read and read and read, and whether it's autobiographies or biographies today there's so much video out there as well. And at the very beginning of when I started doing the research, there was this gift of the BBC 6-part doc that came out, which actually showed aspects of that we hadn't seen much of before. Behind the scenes stuff. Footage of her in the flat with husband Dennis, with her kids, and so I became a bit obsessed with
And
all of
she's
that.
such a divisive character as well, right?
Yes.
How where do you land in that? Not what you think of her, but how do you strip back all that sort of perspective?
Well, then you go to the text. I mean, ultimately, in The Crown, it's all through the prism of the Crown. Whichever prime minister is in which season, it's all through, looking through the eyeglass of the Queen and her experience of the current events and of the prime minister. And so, it's not a biopic.
Yes.
If it was a biopic, there were so many different, aspects of her prime ministership that one would have dealt with. Of the 10 episodes, I'm in 6 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And of those 6, we deal with some things that people may remember or may not have been alive yet, but we deal with the Falklands War, we deal with the sanctions on South Africa, we deal with the IRA, But there's, she was in for a long time. She was in for 11 years.
Yes.
And so, it becomes, the role, I guess, becomes for the actor playing the character is to find a way through the person that exists within that season, as opposed to, and you can be influenced by, there's a gap here between episodes 2 and 4. What took place? How has that aged her? How has she changed in this interim that we don't see? But you really kind of just need to play to the action that's within, on the page.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can just get yourself into...
Yeah, you can't condense 20 years of political career into that moment. You have to go with the text you're given.
Yeah.
So how do you get into role? Is it the wig?
It's all
how do you get in? Prepare yourself to sort of go on set with that role.
Yeah, I mean, we started months beforehand with wig fittings and teeth fittings, which we didn't use in the end, but we were initially thinking that we might need to have a teeth prosthetic. There wasn't a lot of makeup, but certainly getting the makeup right so it felt like it was 80s and it felt like it was her and it worked with the HD and everything.
Yeah.
The clothes, classic, all of that helps. All of it helps. So even though when working at home, in my living room or wherever on lines or on the character, you don't necessarily have all of those props to rely on, then it's the voice, getting the voice right and the mannerisms and the walk and,
It's the whole physical experience of the character. On top of the lines as well.
Yeah.
And so the other thing, looking to the future, sex ed.
Yeah.
There's a season 3 coming.
Yeah, there is.
Are you in production for that? So you haven't started.
Yeah.
It hasn't been filmed. It's going to be filmed.
They are in production. They've already started.
Okay.
Gene starts in October.
Okay.
Yeah. So that will be the first thing that I'll have filmed since lockdown.
Okay. Exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you find that character? Is it for you totally out there? Something you feel is totally different for you?
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
personally.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't had. I mean, even though people sometimes forget this, but a good handful of the X-Files episodes were comedic episodes. They were, yeah. But I think it's easy to forget amongst all the horror and the sci-fi, and so I had experience doing comedy, and certainly some of the theatre that I've done has been comedic. But one wouldn't necessarily hand me a comedic script, and so because of that, for some time, I'd been looking for something that might be the appropriate one for me to do, and really hadn't. I mean, I'd done a couple films that I think never saw the light of day, that I thought were going to be, but so
What do
this
you
is
mean never
really
saw
the
light
first.
day? They never got a wide distribution, or they never got made.
No, they got made.
Oh, okay.
They just I think ended up, well, as you said, they ended up on video.
Okay.
yeah. But yeah, so this is really the first mainstream thing that I've had an opportunity to do, and it's a very different type of acting than all the drama that I've done for so many.
Is it fun?
Yeah, no, it's hugely fun.
You find it fun?
Yeah, it is fun. I mean, that's a valid question, because I've also, I've done feature comedies where you would imagine, given the cast, that it would be hilarious, and yet, and I'm always end up being the straight man, so to speak. So it's not quite the same thing as a Gene type character, but very often comedians are so serious in real life, or so obsessed with the perfection of the thing, that it's not fun for anybody.
No,
so I've also had that experience.
Comedy, aren't they?
Very serious about comedy.
It's like the tragic clown, right? That clown on stage.
So I've also had that experience. So no, but the sex ed is hugely fun to be a part of, and the whole cast is just they're just lovely.
It must be a pretty amazing time. When I was coming in, I saw a billboard with Netflix advertising. We had 5 series, one of which was The Crown, one of which was Sex Ed, and of course now The Fall is trending, right?
Oh right, yeah. Was that one of the things on there? Oh, that's funny.
Well, that's 3. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? All those things to come together.
Yeah, that is. I mean, considering because the Fall, when we first made it, it was BBC, so BBC 2, and then Netflix came on as to help finance season 2, but it wasn't one of their original contents.
No.
And so sometimes people forget that it had originally actually been on Netflix shortly after BBC for a while, but it's almost like rediscovered, or that people discovering it for the first time.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a quick fire round now from
yes.
Gillian. So these have come in from, shall I call them fans?
Yeah.
So, yes. Let's call them fans.
Yeah.
Okay, so people out there. So it's quick fire.
Yeah.
You can answer them how you wish.
Okay.
And let's see how they get on. I've got 10. Right.
All right.
So first question, what's really in Area 51?
Sand.
Okay. They'd have to be one word, but yeah, okay. Maybe this one can get a longer answer.
Okay, all right.
A new skill or hobby you picked up in lockdown?
Exercise.
Exercise. Any particular type of exercise?
Elliptical.
Running?
No. I just
the
cross trainer, the elliptical thing. Yes.
Yeah.
I've suddenly discovered exercise.
Great, excellent.
Yeah.
Your favourite character to play and why?
Well, probably Blanche Dubois, because you can kind of do anything as Blanche and it goes. She's so out there in so many different
Great.
Or actually Jean, same thing. Jean,
you can just have fun.
You can just have fun and say and do anything, and it'll probably end up.
Is Sex Ed is it highly scripted, or can you go a bit?
Oh no, you can go a bit.
A bit
There's a lot of bad lib going on.
So there's a lot of you in that role, then, is there?
Oh yeah.
Will there be a season 4 of The Fall?
In discussion.
In discussion. Okay. I always think that those ones are unfair, right? What are you going to say?
No. But that's. I mean, normally I would say if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have said no.
No. Yeah.
But possibly.
Okay. Very good. All right. Here's one on your Instagram, which someone asked me, "Are you going to ask this?" And I go, "Yeah. Well, someone asked it. Do the phallic symbols on your Instagram feed."
Yep.
The hashtag Yoni of the day and hashtag penis of the day.
Correct.
I assume they're to do with sex ed.
That is correct. Right? Yes, it is. Yes. Okay. Is that the extent of the question?
That is the question.
Okay. Yeah. No. They are entirely to do with. I think it started with posting images from set. Jean's house is covered in imagery, right? Phallic imagery, right? Yeah. So that's how it began, and so I would post the fire ornament, yoni of that day, and then people started sending them to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so very often I will repost something that's been sent to me.
Okay.
As say phallic symbols in nature.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay. So next question: how does it feel to be part of the creation of one of the greatest sci-fi duos in television history.
Pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, it
yeah,
must be.
yeah. I think it took me a while
Yeah.
to fully appreciate how lucky I had that. You know, when you're done
Yeah.
doing that many
Did you
years
want
of
nothing
something,
to do with it?
for a
Yeah,
while, I just needed to be done
Yeah.
with it. After those initial 9 years,
I'm sure.
yeah,
You wanted it.
yeah, and then after a while, I really started to appreciate what a gift it was.
Yeah, that is great. Great series. Who's your favourite musician or band?
Well, Radiohead,
Okay, very good.
but also there's a band called Nu, N-U, which is
NU. Okay.
very, very good kind of
What sort of music?
German.
German music.
Yeah, German music.
Okay.
Yeah, electro, funk.
Okay.
Sort
I'll
of.
check them out.
Actually, I don't know how to qualify them,
Yeah.
but yeah, they're very good. It's
Yeah.
mostly it's a front man and yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'll check it out. Thank you. What are you filming next? I think you may have mentioned already.
Yeah, we're filming season 3 of Sex Education. Yeah.
Okay. Who is one actor that you would love to work with?
Gosh, so many. I mean, I've always been such a huge fan of Kate Blanchett, and it'd be extraordinary to have an opportunity to do a scene with her or something. Yeah, I'd say that.
Okay.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
great.
Why
Yeah,
not?
cool. And finally, here we go. Back to the start.
Yeah.
Is the truth really out there?
Oh, definitely not.
Definitely not.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's fake news, I'm afraid.
All the way. Fake news and misinformation. All right. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for
much.
joining us today. It's been great fun.
Pleasure.